On May 7th, 1931, the police manhunt for two-gun Crowley, a killer stated to end lives at the drop of a feather, would finally come to an end. Crowley was hunkered down in his lover's apartment, locked in an intense gun battle with the police. More than 150 members of law enforcement laid siege to the building. All manner of tactics were used in an attempt to get Crowley to come out, even tear gas. Crowley the cop killer fired incessantly at the police from behind the concealment of a plush couch. Earlier that day, Crowley had been making out with his girlfriend in his car at Long Island. While there weren't police cameras back then, reports indicate an officer approached the vehicle and simply said, "Let me see your license." Without a word, Crowley drew his weapon and fired, repeatedly, at the police officer. As the officer's body fell over, limp, Crowley exited the vehicle, drew the officer's weapon, and used it to fire at the corpse yet again. Crowley would later be sentenced to death. From here, as he lay bleeding, Crowley wrote a letter opening with, "Under my coat is a wary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Later, Crowley would not think to himself that he is being punished for killing people. Instead, he would say, "This is what I get for defending myself." In his mind, he had done nothing wrong. "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man." Few criminals regard themselves as bad men. They are just as human as you and I. So, they rationalize, they explain. They can tell you why they had to crack a safe or squeeze the trigger. They nearly all have some reasoning to justify their actions, though society at large would treat them as villains. If so many hardcore criminals see no fault in their own actions, then what about the normal people you and I interact with every day? I may rationalize to myself how and why the world is unfair, even if my place in it is entirely my own fault. This means that it is difficult to correct people, and likely an action that you and I should be very careful with. Perhaps not avoid entirely, that doesn't seem practical, but be wise in choosing when to do it and how. Criticism will fail when it puts someone on defense. Criticism is dangerous, being that it wounds a person's pride, their sense of importance, and it causes resentment. As former President Lincoln lay dying, Secretary of War Stanton is quoted as saying, "There lies the most perfect ruler of men that the world has ever seen." What made Lincoln such a great leader? Did he deal in criticism? Yes, actually. He was actually quite the troll. He would write letters of criticism and leave them out on public streets for people to just find and read while he was, talking smack about people. Well, one time, Abraham Lincoln, being a lawyer at the time, decided to write publicly intense criticism against James Shields, who was a politician at the time. Shields was a very prideful man and quickly approached Lincoln, challenged him to a duel. At the time, a man could not turn down a duel and save his honor, and so, wittily thinking to use his long arms to his advantage, Lincoln chose the cavalry broadsword as his weapon. Lincoln was opposed to dueling as a concept, but couldn't afford to let his honor die. Thankfully, he wouldn't have to chicken out, draw blood, or die, but only because his and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s seconds both came in to stop the two from fighting. This was an eye-opening event for a younger Abraham. From then on, he would almost never criticize anyone, and certainly not ridicule them. Kindness was the new prescription, written not by a doctor, but by a lawyer and leader. During the height of the Civil War, Lincoln grew frustrated by the generals he put in charge of winning the war. His wife and many others would criticize the generals. Lincoln remained calm. Many of those same people would then speak harshly of the Southerners.
I ask that you do not criticize them, for they are just what we would be under similar circumstances.
At the Battle of Gettysburg, Meade had defeated Lee's army. As Lee retreated, he was pushed against the Potomac River, which had flooded wider and deeper than normal because of storms, making it impassable. Meade had Lee's remaining forces cornered. President Lincoln, being kept apprised of the situation, ordered the general to attack, but the general responded with a plethora of excuses as to why he couldn't, and simply refused to comply. Lincoln was furious. His words went unheeded by his subordinate general. Lee's army had been so thoroughly thrashed that the war could have almost certainly been ended then and there with most any commander willing to order an assault. Lincoln himself, or even a brand new lieutenant, could have led this battle to victory, if only the attack had continued. Despite having learned not to generally criticize people, Lincoln sat down and composed the following letter for General Meade.
My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would have, in connection with our other recent successes, ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so south of the river when you can take with you barely 2/3 of the force you previously had in hand? It would be unreasonable to expect that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it.
But General Meade would never read this letter. It was found among Lincoln's belongings after his death. Dale Carnegie speculated Lincoln's inner monologue when he may have decided not to send this letter.
Maybe I ought not to be so hasty. It is easy to sit in the White House and order Meade to attack. What if I had been at Gettysburg and seen so much bloodshed in the past week? My ears pierced with the screams of soldiers who lay wounded and dying. Maybe I, too, would not be so anxious to attack. If I had been born with Meade's temperament, perhaps I would have done just what he had done. Either way, it's water under the bridge now. If I do send him this letter, it will relieve my feelings, but it will make Meade try to justify himself. It will make him condemn me. It will breed contempt between us and impair his future usefulness as a commander, perhaps even compelling him to resign.
Lincoln had learned that sharp criticism quite often ends in futility. Whatever is rewarded will be repeated. Whatever is punished will be prevented. However, research has shown that many animals learn far better how to behave when their good behavior is rewarded and incentivized rather than when their bad behavior is punished. On average, the human thirst for approval is less than our dread of condemnation. A supervisor at a construction site would often walk around to his workers and tell them authoritatively that the hard hat is mandatory when at the job per company policy. He would be met with sighs and begrudging compliance by the workers who weren't wearing their hard hats. Sometimes he worried that his workers' compliance was entirely dependent on his presence. So, later he decided to try a different approach. Instead of directly confronting workers who weren't wearing their hard hats, he would just ask if the hard hats they'd been provided fit properly, or if they were comfortable, or even give a brief spiel about the reduced risk of injury he had by wearing his own hard hat, and suggest that other people should wear their hard hats as well. All done in a deliberately pleasant tone. No orders, no commands. Perhaps we should walk around with a $5 bill in our pockets, and when frustration strikes, look at the bill and ask ourselves how Lincoln, a great leader of immense interpersonal skill, would behave in the same situation. I had honestly not expected this video to run as long as it has, so I think I'll do a follow-up video with the same topic, but more stories and advice. If you like that idea, or if you don't, please say so down below in the comments. Ironically enough, I'm using a Confederate bill as my bookmark while I am rereading the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, where the material in this video was drawn from. If you liked this video, check the link below and consider purchasing the book. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.